Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Tell Me Everything Fraud Girl Friday. I'm your host, Danielle Spinelli. Today, I have a great guest with me. I have Jamie Cannon. She's with Reliance Partners. We're actually on the TIA fraud task force together. That's how I met her. And really, me and her did a webinar about how to properly vet a COI and what things to look for on a certificate to give you those big warning flags. And then also how to mitigate your risk as far as if you do have a claim, if you've done all your due diligence, and then what type of brokerage coverage you need for insurance and how your contract should be. I think that's probably the biggest takeaway from this whole one that we just like you'll listen to now is that how important your contracts are with your shippers, making sure you're not taking liability from shipper broker. It's a shipper broker contract, not shipper carrier. I know that's a big one that people do. And then also, making sure that your broker carrier agreement has all the things in place just to kind of CYA. Anyways, let's jump into it. Thank you guys for listening in. You guys are so awesome. I love all the feedback that I get on the show. So thank you guys so much. Let's jump in it. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining me on Frog Girl Friday. If you will introduce yourself.
I'm Jamie Cannon. I'm the SVP of Logistics Services at Reliance Partners. I focus on transportation and logistics insurance. I also hold my Certified Insurance Counselor's designation and act as an expert witness for freight broker 3PLs in the transportation industry as well. I've been with Reliance Partners for almost 10 years now. And I'm a third generation transportation person. My grandfather retired from UPS, and then later on he retired again from Roadway. And my dad owned a trucking company. So third generation.
Pretty cool. Yeah, cool. Now jumping into the insurance side of things, I'm sure it's a lot different than obviously being a truck driver, but pretty cool
Yes,
that you get to help the industry do the things. And
exactly.
I guess that leads us to today because you and me, we did like a TIA webinar a little bit ago about how to properly vet like a certificate of insurance. For those that like kind of don't have you know, a software doing it for you. But then even if you do have a software doing it for you, there are some things still you should do, especially if you have like a commodity that's typically like a it's always on like exclusion list. So I guess kind of to get started, the proper ways, I guess, to verify like a COI and like things that I guess you have really seen as far as things being manipulated. And I'm sure you guys see a whole bunch on the insurance side. I know we see a lot on the, monitoring part too. But if you want to kind of give your insights on that.
Right. And so we see that a lot with our broker customers when coverage isn't applying, when they go back to the motor carrier and find out that it was either a fictitious pickup type scenario or they didn't have the coverage that was indicated on the COI. And can we share a COI? Would that be appropriate? Do you want me to see if I can share one on my end?
Yeah.
Right. So on this one, if we just want to jump into kind of what to look for fraud on a COI. One of the things would be when you look at the producer section of the COI, if it lists like the insurance carrier as the producer, that could be a red flag to look for. If it doesn't list the full information, like the address, phone number to the right, or email address, that could be an issue as well. And one of the additional steps that we would recommend taking would be to call the number that's listed or research the number and make sure that that's an accurate insurance company. So like Googling the number, making sure that the insurance certificate lists an email address that's not a Gmail or Yahoo. That might also be another red flag as well.
Because even on what we've seen too is there's been like even like stand up websites that look legit, like super legit, phone numbers, they have the whole 9 yards. So it's, one thing to also, to kind of check if that's a real insurance company, like through the state insurance, I think it's DOI or something like that. Anyway,
Right.
go ahead.
Department of Insurance,
Yeah.
whatever state is Department of Insurance. Yes. If you get to the insurance section, limits that don't look like what you're used to seeing, like a 500,000 or 300,000 GL limit, for instance, instead of 1 million, 2 million limits, that would be something I would question as well. Also, if effective dates don't look right, or, on the vetting side, if they don't match what the load date is, that could be an issue.
Yeah, double checking that. And I think you mentioned this on another thing we did. If it's like mid period, it's not a full year, like January till March or something, should be a red flag because they always should be a year on the certificate, right?
Right. It should technically always be an annual policy. There are a few in the personal auto specifically space that would list like a 6-month policy, but you typically would not ever see this in the commercial insurance space.
Gotcha.
And then also the policy number, there appears to be a change in font on the policy number, or it doesn't make sense. In regards to like what you're used to seeing when you receive a COI, that could be an issue as well. And the same thing with the effective date and expiration date. If the font looks different on those, and you can tell there's been some type of PDF edit, that might be a red flag.
Mm-hmm.
And then also on the section to the left of a COI, if you're looking at the insurance letter, if it doesn't line up to the top right section, where it says the insurer affording coverage, and it lists insurer A, B, C, D. If
Mm-hmm.
those don't match, those sections don't look right, or line up accurately on the insurance letter to the left of the coverages, as
Mm-hmm.
those are listed out, that could also be a red flag as well.
Yeah, definitely. Because a lot of the little tiny mismatches on like them just doing PDF edits, like it's not always going to be exactly the same or not having the same font, which I think AI is helping a little bit with that for them, but some of them are still using PDF, modifies. And so usually you can spot those.
Right. And I've noticed even when they're trying to utilize AI to develop an accurate looking COI, there's still some really big issues,
Oh,
especially
I
with
bet.
the insurance letter section. They don't ever seem to get that right.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of misspellings,
Right.
within the certificate somewhere in there because AI seems to always do that someplace.
And then when you're looking at coverages and you're vetting a motor carrier utilizing a COI, and you see scheduled autos checked, you would want to ensure the VINs that are used for the truck that's used for the load, are listed in the coverage section and the description of operations section of the COI. You may want to see those listed out there. You also may want to see the driver listed out there in case those are excluded.
And that's something like on a scheduled auto policy and even like exclusion lists. And I know we'll jump in more into this, but
Right.
that can technically be changed without, like, even if you're a certificate holder, they don't technically have to notify you of those changes. And a lot of times people change that around quite a bit.
That's true. So a lot of times they do that sometimes they do it to save money. Let's say they're downsizing. We see a lot of midterm policy changes with units being changed out. So that would be something to look out for as well. And if you're going by, a lot of companies will look for any auto to be listed for that box to be checked in the auto liability section. And that doesn't apply to cargo as well. So if you're looking for cargo to apply and it's a truck that's not listed on the cargo policy, if it's a scheduled cargo policy, and there's no box to check for that, you may want to have listed on the COI that the motor truck cargo is also any auto, just to add some additional level of protection there as well.
Interesting. So do they have it where, because I guess I've never personally seen it. I'm sure there's certificates out there, but do they have anything that has like those same boxes in the cargo section? Because like, how would you even know? Or would you just have to always
The
ask?
the only way you would know would be to ask and have it listed in the description of operations section or the description section of the COI that the motor truck cargo policy is an any auto or an not scheduled auto policy.
Interesting. And then I guess so normally with cargo though, typically like if you have a cargo claim, it follows the truck that's on scheduled auto normally, unless if they specifically write that. Is that right?
Correct. And it really
And
just depends on the policy wording there.
and is that more looking at like the declaration page or can you kind of get all this type of stuff on a COI?
You can ask for this on a COI.
Okay. And they'll be able to just kind of add everything in there. Because I do hear sometimes where it's like, oh, the truck's covered, but the driver isn't covered. And I thought cargo covers the truck, not necessarily the driver, if
Right.
unless if it specifies about scheduled or any, but really it doesn't have anything to do with the driver.
And,
But
and
maybe I'm wrong.
there again, if it's a scheduled auto policy and you have, that all of those coverages listed apply to that driver, that truck that's listed on the policy, then there shouldn't be an issue. Obviously, there's always room for gaps and coverage declination based on whatever the scenario is for the claim, but
Hmm.
that just adds that additional level of protection for you to list that on the COI.
Yeah, to double check all that. Stop sharing that one. Crazy what all you got to check. I mean, obviously having like a provider to do that for you is great, but I still do think you need something to do something, especially if you're dealing with like high value commodities. The last time we spoke to, if you can kind of break down the different types of for a broker, the different types of insurance and like which ones are better with what, because I know a lot of it has to do with like your actual shipper contract, because there's a lot of people out there that have a shipper carrier contract instead of shipper broker, and that messes up a whole bunch of things. And, I think a lot of people don't even know about that.
Right. Well, there's different types of coverages, right? So there's contingent cargo coverage, um, which is contingent on the motor carrier's cargo coverage declining, sending a denial letter, or becoming insolvent. And then there's also a primary cargo policy, and that's more for the broker. That's a little bit added protection for the broker because that steps in typically, regardless of the motor carrier's insurance or not, because it's like a cargo legal. So if there's an issue where you've accepted liability with the shipper for the loss or for the load and there's a claim, then it's going to cover the broker because you were liable for it. You accepted liability for it. If you didn't, and this is what we talked about last time, if you don't accept liability in a shipper contract, then that primary cargo coverage may not apply because it's a liability type policy. And they may say, well, you're not legally liable for the loss because you didn't contractually accept liability with the shipper.
Mm.
A way you can avoid that or kind of prevent that is to add like additional coverage there, like a broker ops type endorsement that can add some protection. If you're not liable, it kind of adds a contingent layer. So that way, if the motor carrier's insurance company is insolvent or denies the loss, then at that point they can step in and pay. So it kind of offers protection, dual protection, primary and contingent for you.
Interesting.
Right. And then there's also shipper's interest cargo, which is more protection for the shipper. So it typically would go in and pay, first dollar. It doesn't go after the motor carrier's insurance. It doesn't affect the broker's insurance, but a broker should still have that level of protection for themselves in the event of a loss, in addition to that shipper's interest. And we see that a lot with high value loads, high risk loads. We'll see the shipper's interest coverage come into play in those scenarios.
And you can buy it per shipment,
Correct.
or have it covered per shipper, I guess, right? Or is it, I guess it's totally different two things,
Right,
but
and
you
it
can,
depends on what type of reporting you wanna have for it as well. You can
okay.
do it by the load, pay by the load, or you can do it, on a monthly reporting type basis, similar to like an auto reporter or something like that. And then, you know, on some primary cargo policies, sometimes you can add a shipper specific endorsement to cover high value. But there again, in that type of scenario, it's going to cover you as a broker, not necessarily the shipper first dollar like a shipper's interest policy would.
I think one of the biggest things like I've seen too is like whenever they put on the policy, like they're like the carrier is not responsible if there's theft for by them or the employee. And there's kind of like all these little tiny loopholes. There's so many loopholes, I feel like, in insurance. And that's why they're making money. They're profitable because they're trying to, not everybody, but a lot of people are trying to get out of paying, especially carrier stuff. So I guess if you can touch a little bit on that, on like, if to me that's suspicious if they say something like that, but maybe it's they're trying to get the rates down or whatever. But it's hard to, if you have something where you believe it's the carrier as a broker and you're doing your, I guess, due diligence on things. Turns out it wasn't the actual carrier, somebody posing as the carrier, doing kind of those phishing attempts and all those things that, we see out there with the fraud. Them not being able to take anything happening with insurance. So that's kind of where that secondary layer of insurance comes in. Or do you feel like there's still ways to push on the carrier's insurance if, somebody poses as them and things like that?
Right. Typically not, just because they didn't have any involvement in that process. What you can do is make sure that you have a strong primary cargo policy in place that doesn't exclude fictitious pickup or carrier theft. Also, one of the other endorsements we're seeing kind of added on there is theft by motor carriers employees. So some of this,
Hmm.
the old theft that we used to see and that we probably miss,
Yeah.
was theft by motor carrier. And
Yeah.
now, you rarely see that anymore, but there's still some exclusions in the policy forms and endorsements where they're adding that exclusion back into kind of reduce losses. And it's, obviously it's an insurance company, a big insurance company is trying to be profitable because it is a company running a business. And there was no way they could have predicted the size of losses that they were getting. So they didn't really,
Right.
they didn't really rate for that. And so they're just trying to kind of protect themselves, and they're not doing it maliciously to, add these endorsements in, but obviously it's creating a big gap in coverage for especially our broker clients.
Yeah, totally have it, and I think there's more and more that they keep adding, and it's like you can't even I feel like you can't even keep up sometimes because like by even employees, it's like how sometimes there's some things that I hear and I'm like, "Ah, that kinda sounds like it is somebody's in on it." Like, how do they know all the things? And, that's a hard thing to prove, and so, like, even having that on there is like, it would be difficult to prove. There's definitely no way that they're in on it.
Right. I think the big thing is just ensuring that you have strong coverage in place, like strong primary coverage as a broker, reducing as many gaps as possible with the endorsements, and then also adding some layers like crime, cyber. A lot of those policies, like crime, you can include employee theft and include some type of third party coverage. Just to add some additional levels of protection. But the bigger thing is your shipper contracts, because shippers are requiring more and more brokers to assume that primary liability, making
Right.
sure that if you're assuming primary liability, you have primary coverage in place and not contingent coverage in place, or some type of contingent coverage with primary endorsements to kind of add to your coverage and broaden that. And then also making sure you have stronger broker carrier agreements in place.
Right.
From an insurance perspective, I can't advise on it from a legal perspective, but from an insurance perspective, that's going to provide the best support for coverage is making sure that both agreements are strong, both with the shipper and the motor carrier.
And mainly with the agreements for the broker carrier is just simply putting in that they are grabbing liability whenever they sign off on the BOLs and that they, have X amount of coverage and blah, blah, blah. That's part of their agreement. That's the main things to touch on, right? Or is there other things that are new that people should be adding to their agreements?
Right. I mean, just paying close attention that your insurance coverage is lined up with how you're accepting liability with the shipper contracts, and then making sure that, the motor carrier is
Yeah.
it is actually, stepping up and being liable in your agreement with them.
Right. So kind of tag teaming in. And even if you have the primary, really you do want the insurance cover because they would pay back your insurance company. Even like they're taking responsibility. So really, even with primary, they still go after the carrier stuff, right? Or
Right.
no? Okay.
Yes, so they're still gonna subrogate against the motor carrier whenever they can, which is gonna help your loss runs as well. So, it's
Yeah.
gonna, not have such a negative impact on your losses when you have primary coverage, but they're still gonna go after the motor carrier, through subrogation. And having
Yeah.
a company that has a strong subrogation team, um, that's huge as well.
And I guess elaborate on that because I don't even know what all that means.
Right, just making sure that you have a insurance company that has a good history with subrogation that's been
Oh,
doing it for
gotcha.
a long time and, is gonna actively pursue subrogation.
Yeah. They understand kind of what's going on with the trends and they know what to push on and things like that.
Right, exactly.
Crazy. Yeah, and then another thing just to kind of loop back into the certificate of insurance stuff. I think what I think is difficult as a broker is you are running so fast and then you're calling like I used to do copper. So I have to always call in exclusions every single time and get them to put it in writing. Even if they say it over the phone, they have to send it to me in writing. That sometimes took forever. And sometimes like they'd be like, I have to get with the underwriter. I don't have that. It like a day later. And obviously that's why a lot of people just say, taking the chance, let's try it. But it should be where even the agents have like that exclusion list pretty handy, I would think. Or what's normal for that?
And they should. So it's something where the insurance agent that they're requesting the certificate of insurance from and the verification of coverage from, they should have that within the policy form. A lot of times, also, and we didn't talk about this last time, a lot of times your underwriters are not licensed agents. They're not licensed. They don't have an insurance license, so they can't even really explain the coverage. It's up to your agent to really dive in and explain that type of coverage to you and, review the policy form with you.
Interesting.
So, yeah, but the insurance agent would have access to the policy and should be able to relay any exclusions that are on the policy.
Yeah, it should be pretty quickly. Like to me, I feel like that gives them a chance to be like, "Hey, you have this as an exclusion. Do you want to go ahead and add this coverage in, or something like that?" Almost like on the back end.
Exactly.
I don't know. It just comes. It always just kind of seemed weird to me whenever they gave me a hard time getting that. I'm like, "How do you not have this? That's literally what you do."
Right. Yeah, I
So
mean, it's something that as long as the insured approves, releasing that information, and if you're a certificate holder, then you can definitely have some of that information handed to you. So
right. And so I guess as far as like I'm a broker, I'm handling high value loads or any loads. As far as like a good rule of thumb, what would you say is kind of like the best thing for yeah, on like a every load basis? And obviously there's a lot that I know you would want to do, but like realistically, I'm running through loads X fast. What is something that like a quick thing that they should always be doing?
outside of verifying the certificate of insurance, um, heavily vetting the carrier, making sure that the that the
Yeah.
carrier is the carrier, um, and just making sure that they have good coverage in place without restriction for exclusions. Having everything listed, I would list the commodity. Obviously, I would probably go a little bit overboard. I would list the commodity on the description of operations of the COI to make sure that there's no exclusion for that commodity. And then I would also ensure there's no exclusion for theft. Make sure there's a realistic deductible on there as well, especially if it's a smaller company. That wouldn't apply if it's like a larger self-insured um, type trucking company, but a smaller motor carrier, I would ensure that the deductible is actually within reason
Yeah.
for them to make payment on. And then also that the vehicle and the driver are included on the policy, have that listed on the COI as well. And then keeping in mind, you can also request a copy of the declarations page to kind of take that a step further and make sure of those terms also.
Yeah, almost like especially with high value, it does take extra time, but that's kind of why you're getting paid extra for that high value load, I think. But
Right.
got to do your all your due diligence. Well, thanks for coming on. If you'll kind of say how we can find your company and kind of round this out, I guess that'd be great.
Yeah. So it's www.reliancepartners.com. If you want to look us up online, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, um, or you can reach out to my email, jamie.cannon@reliancepartners.com.
And they have a really good summit each year, right? Is it always in Nashville?
Yes. So we have it
Okay.
in Nashville as well.
Yeah, and your guys' summit, like I learned a lot there actually. Like normally I go to summits and it's like I always hear the same cargo theft and fraud talk, but I actually learned quite a bit whenever I was that one. So it's a good one. Good one to go to.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Well, thanks for coming on. Bye everybody.
Thanks for having me. Bye.